AM 1460 WXBR, the talk of Metro South. You're listening to the Metro South Morning Show, PM in the AM. Peter Czymbor here with you on this Monday morning, April the 28th, 2014. Today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, and with that in mind, joining us right now via the telephone is Lucy Lipiner. She's the author of A Long Journey Home, a young girl's memoir of surviving the Holocaust. She's a Holocaust survivor, as you can tell from the title of her memoir, and we welcome Lucy into the program. Lucy, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning.
Lucy, your memoir, most of it is set in 1939. Over 70 years later, what made you decide now to put your memories on paper and publish this book?
Okay. I decided, I remember much from my early childhood, and I wrote my story for my children primarily. They rarely ask any questions about those terrible years of the war and what it did to our lives. And I thought that one day they may have questions, and perhaps I should answer those questions now in my book. The other reason why I wrote my book is a tribute to my parents. You see, as a child, my father was bigger than life. But more than that, he was a true hero. He saved the lives of 15 people during the Holocaust. My book is also dedicated to my mother. She lost her entire family in the Holocaust. And it was a wound that never healed. She rarely spoke of her sisters and brothers. And her pain was especially evident when she read in the press about the Holocaust deniers. That was so painful to her. Tears would moisten her face, and she would say, "So where are my sisters and brothers?" And I hope by writing my stories to make a small dent in the false theories of the Holocaust deniers.
Let's talk about your father for a moment, because you mentioned that your father was a larger-than-life figure to you growing up. That's probably even prior to all of this happening, when he saved the lives of many people. You mentioned 15 during the course of the Holocaust. You were born and raised essentially in Poland, and right before World War II was set to begin, and Nazi Germany was coming in and taking over Jewish people and putting them in concentration camps, your father gathered you and your family, and gathered others as well, and kind of had an intricate plan to get you guys out of harm's way. Explain exactly what your dad did and how he went about it.
Okay. So my father understood what was going on in Nazi Germany in 1930s. He understood, he knew about the persecution of Jewish people in Nazi Germany, and he understood Nazi Germany's hatred of the Jewish people, and he took it seriously. He believed that this type of anti-Semitism could potentially be deadly. So my father began planning our escape even before the outbreak of war, September 1st, 1939. And he was able to persuade extended family, my immediate family. We were 4 of us, my mom, my dad, my sister, and myself. But he persuaded approximately 11 other people of his extended family, his 2 sisters, children, grandchildren, to join us. And we all had to leave our homes and businesses and just leave the town. In the middle of the night, we escaped. And we escaped the day that Nazi Germany invaded Poland, September 1, 1939.
Now, where did you go? You guys left Poland, but where did you go? Where did your dad bring you?
We were heading east towards the Soviet-occupied part of Poland. And it was a very long journey because we were traveling in a horse-drawn wagon. open wagon in all kinds of weather. That journey took us approximately 3 months before we actually reached Soviet Union-occupied Poland. We left September 1st, and when we arrived, in the eastern occupied Poland, it was probably end of October, beginning of November.
Once again, we're chatting with Lucy Lipiner, author of Long Journey Home, a young girl's memoir of surviving the Holocaust, here on WXBR. Lucy, about how old were you at the time World War II began, when your family had to flee Poland?
I was 6 years old.
So you're 6 years old, and still to this day you have vivid memories of your family traveling by horse-drawn wagon at night through the elements of life and the elements of earth as you guys escaped Poland.
Yes. And all the adults actually were walking day and night beside the wagon. There was absolutely no room for the adults, only for the children. There was room for the children, 4 of us children, and a cousin that was pregnant at the time. All the others just walked beside the wagon for months.
Now, with you being 6 years old, how much did you understand of what was happening? Because to understand that Nazi Germany was invading your country and trying to eliminate people of your religion from living, that's got to be a lot to take for a 6-year-old. How much did you get it at the time?
I didn't understand at the time, although I was a child, very inquisitive, and I was very much interested in what adults were speaking, talking about, and many times I was told not to eavesdrop on adult conversations. So I do remember conversations about Hitler. I didn't know who Hitler was, but the adults were whispering and tried to convey these messages to each other in a very quiet manner. But it was unsettling to me as a young child.
Now, where did your family sleep and things of that nature as you were traveling by night? You via horse-drawn wagon, the adults walking besides the wagon. Where did you guys sleep and rest up and, go from day to day, night to night?
They would just stop and in forests, or we were always traveling on country road, dirt road. They would just stop and lay down on the ground wherever they could find. Sometimes I remember adults were literally laying under the wagon and resting that way. But those are the things I remember. We were fortunate, the children. We were kind of sleeping on top of our bundles, but not the adults. It was rather difficult.
Now, did you find people along the way that were willing to help you, or was it a matter of not trusting anyone around you, keep on plodding ahead, and not talk to anyone?
Well, I must tell you that whenever we encountered people, our own people, Jewish people, we did ask for help. And frequently we did get some bread. They shared some bread with us. Sometimes they even asked us into their homes and shared a warm fireplace with us, or a glass of tea. But that wasn't too frequent. But I do remember such times when other people shared their bread with us.
Now, what did your family do for work when you guys were in Poland prior to fleeing before the start of World War II?
Well, my father had a business, a grain business. He was selling to farmers. And I remember his store and a huge warehouse. But that's all I remember. Again, I was very young at the time.
So outside of the occasional good doer that was of your own faith, how did you guys maintain food, water, and things like that you need to survive?
Yes, we sometimes they were able to buy some. I don't know how, because the Polish currency was worthless at that time. I think my family were trading things for food. At some point, my mother had given up all her underwear, her beautiful silk underwear for food.
Once again, we're chatting with Lucy Lipiner. Yes, Lucy, continue.
Yes, there were times when they actually walked into fields and took, it was late in September, October, so there was food to be gathered in the fields, and yes, they were stealing it, but those were the realities of life.
You had to make ends meet no matter how you could at that point. We're chatting with Lucy Lipiner, author of Long Journey Home, a young girl's memoir of surviving the Holocaust. You left Poland. Eventually, you ended up in the United States. Did you come to the United States with your family after a few years of fleeing, or did that come later? And where were your stops in between leaving Poland and ending up in America where you live now?
Yes, we came, fortunately, Mom, Dad, my sister and I came together to the United States exactly 10 years after the outbreak of World War II. So it's been a long 10 years for us. After we were allowed to leave Soviet Union, we did spend approximately 4 years in displaced persons camps in Germany, of all places. And from one of those camps in Germany, we were able to leave with the help of my uncle, my father's brother, who lived in the United States, and he sort of helped us come and make our home here.
Now, when you guys did settle prior to coming to the United States for any place for, a certain period of time, how did your family make ends meet? You mentioned that your father did have a job in Poland prior to fleeing. What did you guys do for work, or your family do for work, when you guys settled in the Soviet Union?
When we settled in Soviet Union, it was very, very difficult. My father could not really get what you call a conventional job. It was, again, trying to trade things and find things. And at some point, my father was dealing in an illegal type of activity. And so many things in Soviet Union were not allowed, and they were illegal. My father was actually buying and selling dye in a very pure form that almost looked like crystal, and that was forbidden. But he risked it, and our whole family risked it in order to survive.
Now, why was that illegal?
Well, in Soviet Union, any kind of enterprise was illegal.
I see. Yes, communist regime.
Communist regime.
Once again, we're chatting with Lucy Lipiner, author of Long Journey Home, a young girl's memoir of surviving the Holocaust. You mentioned earlier in the interview, Lucy, that you wrote this book for 3 reasons. One of the reasons was that you wanted your children to know of your experience. It's something they've never really asked you about. Why do you think your children have never asked you too much about your experiences of escaping the Nazi regime in Poland?
That's a very interesting question, because I wondered about it very frequently. Was it that they thought it may be too painful for me to discuss it? I don't know. Was it that they wanted to become American so badly? Was it that they wanted to be like other young American people? And was it perhaps a little bit of feeling shame that their parents, because both my husband also is a Holocaust survivor, that their parents were not like their friends' parents? It's hard to tell.
might have thought that you would have had a similar reaction that your mother had. As you mentioned, it was a wound that never healed, that she lost pretty much her entire family in that whole ordeal.
And she never spoke about it, hardly ever.
Did you ask her about it, or did she never speak about it? Did you ever ask her about it?
I didn't ask her. I knew it was very painful. And in one of the chapters of my book, I do explain it. I don't know that we have time for this. She did sometimes say, she would literally whisper it and say, I wish I had a photograph. I don't remember what they looked like. So I knew how painful this was. And perhaps for that reason, I never really asked her.
Now, you mentioned the other reason why you wrote this book. You mentioned one was for your children. The other was to, keep the memory of your mother alive. The other was to help counterattack those Holocaust deniers, as you mentioned. I think those people are few and far between. They are a minority, yet they are a passionate minority that does exist in this world. Does that bother you to any significant degree, or do you just kind of look at them and say they're a bunch of loons?
Well, both. They are a bunch of loons, of course, but it's so inconceivable for me to hear about such people and to think of their philosophy. How can a normal person think that Holocaust did not exist? I mean, the evidence is there. It's everywhere.
Some people just keep up a lie because they're crazy. We're chatting with Lucy Lipiner. Lucy, you landed in America 10 years after the start of World War II. How long did it take your family to get their feet on the ground here in the United States following leaving everything behind and giving everything they had in order to get out of Poland prior to the start of World War II? How long did it take your family to really settle here in the United States and live a productive life?
We were very fortunate because my uncle Jack, my father's brother, he and his wife and his two sons, they opened their home and their heart to us. I mean, we had a roof over our heads. The moment we landed, we came into the United States. And then my father started working with his brother in his brother's business. My sister went to work. I had to drop out of high school, and I went to work, and that helped us to make a life here. I did get my education eventually. I earned a degree from University, New York City, from CUNY, City University of New York, and a advanced degree from NYU. But I never went to high school.
Well, you get the college degrees. Who needs high school when you get the college degrees? Lucy, you're now a published author. What did you do to make your living after coming to America and after graduating from college?
Well, I became an occupational therapist.
An occupational therapist. Well, Lucy, I want to thank you so much for coming on the program this morning. The book is Long Journey Home, a young girl's memoir of surviving the Holocaust, available on Amazon and in bookstores. If there are any bookstores still exist, I'm sure it's available on Kindle and things of that nature as well. Lucy, any final words for our listeners this morning on this Holocaust Remembrance Day before I let you go?
Well, yes. I would like to say what is very important for the reader to gain from this book is an understanding that in spite of hunger and cold and deprivation, if you never lose hope, you can survive. And in spite of the incredible odds against surviving, I would like people to know that, yes, you can find the strength and resilience and perseverance to survive. So, yes.
If you never lose hope, you can survive. Lucy Lipiner, Long Journey Home, a young girl's memoir of surviving the Holocaust is the book. Lucy, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Have a nice day.
You have a nice day as well. You're listening to the Metro South Morning Show, PM in the AM, WXBR, the talk of Metro South. We'll step aside for a local news update courtesy of Mike Pava. Back with more of the program after this.